Greetings, everyone. My name is Sandra Bell, and I am from Trinidad. I was born in Trinidad and Tobago and spent most of my life here in New York. And we are standing on the Lefferts Historic House on the porch, which hosts the J'ouvert Genesis Immersive Experience, a multimedia exhibition on J'ouvert. And J'ouvert means opening of the day in French, and it was creolized by the freed African people in Trinidad, which is the beginning of the carnival, which ends on Ash Wednesday. So we are about to what they call reimagine Lefferts Historic House, with now the freed people having the exhibition here at this house. So we're about to show you what J'ouvert is all about, how the carnival got started, and more. What you're seeing here are some of the traditional J'ouvert characters that were created by enslaved Africans in Trinidad and Tobago and freed Africans who lived there as well. Our first character is what is known as the Midnight Robber. Now, this Midnight Robber came a little bit later after J'ouvert was established. So we love our Midnight Robbers. However, there are other characters that I must tell you about, because without them, there's no carnival. And I want to introduce you to the dragon. We have a whole slew of masqueraders. That's what they do. They are dragons, all kinds of beautiful dragons, I have to say. This character is a 2022 character. And this costume was worn by flag woman Janet Maria Lewis, who she always plays Queen. And this costume, would you believe, came from Brazil. Weighs something like 100 pounds. It's very heavy, but very beautiful as well. Okay, so in order for a J'ouvert band to really be a J'ouvert band, you have to have music. And it's, of course, being West African, we have to have our drum. However, you know, the Europeans thought that the drum is a dangerous instrument and banned the drums. So we went inside of our houses to create percussive instruments that would create a rhythm so that we would have music in our yards and in the street on Carnival Day. So what you see here is an old rendition. This was done by Alfredo Caballo, a Caribbean artist back in the day who captured the stick fighters, the boutonnières, the ones who fought for you in the village and fought among themselves as well. The stick fighters were also protectors of the communities, because in those days, there were not really any police or anything like that, but there were the authorities, the French authorities or the British authorities, that really were very cruel and disrespectful to the freed Africans as well as the enslaved. We're going to go out into the other part of the exhibition, which is the hallway. The tambo bamboo is also a percussive instrument originating in Trinidad and Tobago, when the drums were banned, of course. And these bamboo sticks, with smaller wooden sticks, were used to beat on the ground, and with these sticks make your rhythm from it. There were whole bands of tambo bamboo going down the street on a J'ouvert morning, beating their rhythm out of these bamboo pieces and wooden sticks. Here's one more for you. This is our bat. The bat is also have become a traditional J'ouvert character. And so the bat is among a group of animal types that's in J'ouvert. In the Caribbean, as in tropical places, you know, there are lots of bats. So why not? The bat is an important part of the J'ouvert traditional characters. As I said, it's a multimedia exhibition, and part of this exhibition are the photographs, great photographs by Jason A. Ordain from Trinidad and Tobago. And what he does, only traditional characters. We have the fancy sailor, we have the jab, we have the midnight robbers. We have 3 different kinds of midnight robbers. We have 2 different kinds of fancy black Indians, and the dragon, and of course the gorilla. We're gonna go into what I call room number 2. So in this showcase, you will see things tire iron, more bottle and spoons, biscuit tins which came out of Britain, and we made instruments out of them because at that time the drums were still banned. So we had to do something. You'll see the tire irons, which I consider the second instruments of Trinidad and Tobago. They came off of the trucks that the Americans brought with them when they came to get some of that oil in Trinidad. So what do you do with the discarded truck parts? You make instruments out of them. And tire iron is one of the essential instruments in J'ouvert, in keeping the rhythm for calypso and other songs. We'll start out with our first character, which is the Pueblo Gwenad. And the Pueblo Gwenad came out of the whole scenario of a court jester, where the Europeans would sit in a kind of a court, and you would have these people reading, you know, poems and speeches. And it came out of the West African tradition of the Igungun. The Igungun were the masqueraders that brought the messages from your ancestors to the people who are alive, the villagers. So this whole strips of cloth covering the entire body is also part of the ancestral memory that came together with the European Pueblo Gwenad, the court jester, so to speak. They talk a lot. They say all kinds of things that you don't understand. And of course, when they come up to you and they start talking this way, they say they'll put a spell on you if you don't know. So that's part of the carnival tradition and one of the important characters, the Pueblo Gwenad. Now we move on to our black fancy Indian. The people of Trinidad and in the Caribbean so fascinated with the pictures that they saw of the Native Americans, that they created their own groups of black fancy Indians. And they, of course, tried to make their costumes based on what they saw in pictures. And then, of course, later on, the television came, so there was always the cowboys and Indians and the robbers, the bandits. But what happened was this fascination with the Native Americans here just took off like wildfire. And you have people, groups of masqueraders, that's all they do. They're black Indians. And they're all different types as well. And they have their own language, which you don't know what they're talking about, but they seem to know. So we move on now to one type of jab. As I said before, the jab is the creolized word for diablo, which is the French word meaning devil. This particular one carries a whip. They come from the central part of Trinidad, which they have a lot of ritual. They have to be trained. You cannot just be a jab like that. And you have to know how to flail that whip. And the whip represents, of course, the cruelty of the slave master. Because in West African tradition, there are no devils, there are no angels. they do not have a Catholic religion to have a heaven and hell. So this whole aspect of devil and angel and going to hell, and you'll meet the devil, or you're going to become a devil if you don't do right, is a European Catholic religion that was brought with the Europeans and forced on many of the West Africans that were enslaved in the Caribbean and beyond. And they also have them in other Francophone islands as well. So J'ouvert is a tradition that's evolving and still using what is current now to express itself. And this was one of her costumes, Queen Baker. Mind you, this skirt had about 5 or 6 cans underneath it. So this is very modified, what you see here. I would be remiss to not talk about this illustration here. This is by Melton Pryor, another great artist back in the day in Trinidad and Tobago. So this illustration is of Carnival Day, J'ouvert morning, in Port of Spain. And if you look closely, you will see that all the Europeans are upstairs, most of them behind that balcony upstairs looking down, because they're not joining that. You'll see a few disgruntled priests looking on at the scandal that's going on. And you will also see the signs that are in French, that because, like I said, the French were in Trinidad. And they were part of the development of this J'ouvert and the daytime carnival. In this room, it is fashioned after what we call the barakyard. As I explained earlier, the barakyard were shacks in the back of the big houses generally, where the enslaved people live and the freed people live, because once you were emancipated, where you didn't have any money, you had to stay probably right where you are until you were able to work and get paid and accumulate some money for a better type of living. So the barakyard was very undecorated. It was very neutral. You used what you had. You tried to make a little furniture in there. You build up your shack with whatever piece of wood and thatch roof if you had. You know, I wouldn't call it primitive, but you know, you had no money to buy anything, so you made do. If you look around, you'll see the big brown bags. These symbolizes sugar, bags of sugar, because as I said earlier, sugar was king. This is why one of the reasons people were dragged out of West Africa to come to cultivate. This was king, made lots of money for the Europeans and a lot of suffering for the enslaved people. We'll start out with the baby doll. Baby doll is a sort of comedic, tragic character, right? A young woman who got pregnant, have no idea who the baby daddy is. And this character is an essential part of J'ouvert. She goes around in the band or just walking around with a baby in her arm and a big bottle, demanding money from men who she accuses to be the baby daddy. Now, generally, she goes up to him and says, "You're the daddy," and demands money from him. And he generally goes in his pocket, gives her money, and runs away because he doesn't want to be associated with this woman or be accused of fathering a child that he knows nothing about. That baby doll, you don't have a good J'ouvert, because she is very important. There's lots of women who had no money and had no choice but to sleep with men, or they were raped, or it's incest, and they have these children and have no idea who these children's fathers are. So our next character we have is, he's a hybrid. He's a hybrid of the Jab Jab. And this king job has added wings onto his costume, which makes it much more elaborate and much more dramatic. And people love to see this particular kind of job because it goes extra. And he gets a lot of pictures. Remember, we have more than one kind of job, and this is one of them. Now, in the backyard, people cooked outside. As you can see, we have this pot, right, with some chickens getting ready to go in the pot. And we have things like the coal pot, because that's what people cooked on. And there was no electricity, so they used what we call flambeau. You put kerosene in here with a wick, and pray it doesn't get too close to your eyebrows or your hair, or you won't have any. The women mostly cooked on these coal pots, and of course the food was like considered the best food for some reason. And of course in those backyards there were people selling, like Miss Merle. She would be selling break and saltfish. And bake is a fried bread, or you could bake it on top of your coal pot. That was a popular meal in a backyard, especially on the weekends when they had music and people were dancing, and there was no hall, there was no park. Everything happened right there. Now we're going to go on to our more characters, and this one is called the Fancy Sailor. Now the Fancy Sailor came again out of the Americans coming to Trinidad to get that oil. So there's lots of sailors in their white uniforms. This sailor is not as fancy as a lot of the sailors because they go all the way. So on top of the sailors' heads, there would be all kinds of things depicting the theme, such as Christmas in July. There's another one called London Bridge is falling down. So everything that is in Britain was on top of these sailors' heads. So this is the Fancy Sailor, fascinated. The Trinidadians were fascinated by these sailors in their white uniforms coming off those big ships. And as we go around the backyard, we come to our other jablo, the jab molassie, meaning as sugar was king, there was lots of molasses coming out of that sugar. So folks painted their whole body with this molasses, which is black, looks black. And now they don't use black anymore. They use oil and black paint to paint themselves. And this particular Jaba Molassie is out of Grenada. They carry the change, which of course symbolizes slavery and the emancipation. And they carry their buckets filled with black paint. And again, if you don't want to get paint on you, please do not go in the band and try to have a fight, because you came out there to be clean, and the Jab have no respect for that. So don't go in the band if you don't want black paint on you or powder. So now we're still in the backyard, and of course there are people like Mr. Peters who sell hot nuts. You'll find people selling hot nuts, fried bacon, saltfish, all over Trinidad and Tobago and in other Caribbean countries during Carnival and beyond. So I want to now show you to one more of our characters that is essential to J'ouvert. This is Dame Lorraine, who mimicked the slave masters and the plantation owners' wives. Because as you know, you're in the backyard and you're playing your music and you're having a little grog, which means a little, little spirits. and everybody's, you know, laughing and having fun. And then someone comes out with a big pillow to make a bigger bottom and some more stuffing to have large breasts, imitating, making fun of the plantation owners' wives. And so this particular character carries an umbrella, has her arms covered because she's a white woman and doesn't want to get sunburned, wears gloves, wears a mask, carries an elaborate bag and probably a big hat with plenty of flowers and a mask. Oh, usually, back in the day, it was only men who played these characters, but now women play them too. And of course, it's always funny to see a man all dressed up in a dress with a big bottom and and a beard and a mustache. In 1881 was the time that J'ouvert was officially recognized after the Camboulé riots. Already the British had taken over from the French, which they were more strict. So the drums were still banned. They didn't want you to dance and sing. They thought it was scandalous and all other kinds of descriptives they used. However, we kept on going because it's in us. We love our music. We love to dance. We're loud. We're all of those things. And of course, sipping tea and crumpets was not one of the things we did. Hence, you had the Camboulé riots. Cane brûlée is burnt cane. So out of that burnt cane riots, where they burnt down many of the cane fields in Port of Spain and in the south part of Trinidad and San Fernando, the British were like, okay, we cannot keep doing this. Somewhere in their mind, they recognized that we better recognize that these people are free, because this is 1881 now. Emancipation happened in 1838. So with that combination of the fires, the combination of the stick fighters getting together and actually confronting the authorities, after all of that confrontation, a lot of people died, got hurt. So they recognized that J'ouvert is official. What you see now grew. It came out of J'ouvert. Without J'ouvert, there's no carnival. Well, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things you've got to do if you ever get an opportunity is to join us in the J'ouvert band. I cannot describe the experience. It's more of a spiritual kind of thing, where here you are, as the sun is rising, you're going down the street with all these people. Some of them you know and some of them you don't. And the rhythm is kicking, and maybe you have a little spirits. And it's an experience that I would encourage people who are culturally curious and love to have some fun should try joining a J'ouvert band. It's very important to understand where you came from and how things got started, so you would be able to talk about your legacy and your culture and understand where it came from. It didn't just drop out of the sky. It came from struggle. It came from fight. It came from battling. It came from determination and, of course, resilience, because we're still here today and we will continue to celebrate our ancestry, our legacy, and of course, always have fun.